Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail. Today we are going to share true Skinwalker horror stories. First story. I think I met a Skinwalker. Growing up in Arizona, myths and legends are a part of life. Native traditions, mystic places, vortexes, UFO abductions, and dozens of other stories of the unknown that I always found fascinating. I grew up spending a lot of time wandering around the desert and the mountains, hunting, camping, etc., so I felt very at home in the wilderness. One late spring day on one of my many hiking adventures, I wandered off trail and after several hours came upon a small group of old mud adobe houses. A few people heard me coming and came out of the houses to investigate, and after apparently making the collective decision that I was not a threat, one of the elders dressed in old-style traditional native clothing and a headdress came over to greet me. The man spoke slowly and told me that I had wandered onto a Navajo reservation and asked me if I was lost or if I needed help. When I told him no, I was lost, but intentionally, he chuckled and invited me in to eat with his family. The next several hours were one of the great experiences of my life. The whole thing was like being thrown back in time. While we ate and talked, others from the surrounding houses began coming over to join us, and I got the feeling they didn't get many outside visitors. We shared stories for hours about life, family, theater history in the area, and time spent in the wild, and the longer we talked, the more they opened up and the more interesting the elders' stories got. Throughout the time, there was one man who never spoke. He just sat out of the circle listening and watching me. At one point, I told them I did what I called my walkabouts every year around September, where I would go out by myself into the wilderness for 2 to 4 weeks at a time, and this got the attention of the one silent old man. When I finished, he came over to the circle around the fire, sat directly on the ground in front of me, and asked me to join him on the ground. He told me that years ago, he used to do the same thing, and went on to tell me about the canyon he went to. He described it as a dangerous but magic place, and that I would see the world differently if I came back. If must be for dramatic effect. When he finished, he invited me over to his home. The house was small, and through an open door in the back room, I could see it was filled with various animal pelts, coyotes and wolves mostly. He walked over and closed that door, then picked up and handed me an old map and some written directions that seemed like he had been holding on to them for a long time, and just walked away into that back room and closed the door behind him. It was late, and one of the families had invited me to stay the night, which I gladly did. The next morning as I prepared to leave, one of the old women came over to me with something in her hands, handed me a talisman, and simply said, "Dip your bullets in the white ash at the hottest part of the fire," then just walked away. September came, and as I packed for my walkabout, I saw the talisman in a drawer, and something felt right about taking it with me. After a beautiful drive, I was very happy to find the Forest Service road marked on the old map. The entrance to the area was remote and overgrown, and tough to get to even in my Jeep, and took me much longer to get to than expected, so I decided to make camp and start the hike in the morning. After a few hours on a trail that looked like it had been forgotten, I came to a stream and the entrance to the secret valley. It was a narrow crack in the tall cliffs with about 4 feet of water running gently through, but too narrow for a kayak or canoe. I hoisted my gear over my head and began the wade sideways through the chest-deep water. The crack in the cliff seemed to go on forever, but after almost 2 hours I came to the place where it opened up into a small lake in an incredible valley surrounded by tall rock faces. This may have been the most remote place I have ever been, in the sense that there was no sign that people had ever been there. No trash, no bullet casings, not even the evidence of campfires. My first night, there was the quietest night I have ever spent in the wild. No birds, no frogs, not even crickets, but I didn't feel like I was alone there. In the morning after breakfast, I headed out on my first exploratory hike to explore my new home for the next couple weeks. After being stalked by a mountain lion on a hike about 10 years ago, I make a point of now bringing a pistol with me when I'm out wilderness hiking. After some looking around, I found a narrow path that appeared to be a game trail that lead up the side of one of the cliffs and towards what looked like caves from the canyon floor. I made my way up to them and came upon an entrance that was much larger than it appeared from below. I made some noise to alert any possible animals I was there and made my way inside. The cave was an expansive single chamber that went back a couple hundred feet. As I walked, I inspected as much as I could see with my light, but there was no tracks of any kind in the dirt besides mine. So I decided I was alone in there and pushed on towards the rear of the cave. As I came around the last bend in the cave and approached the end, my headlamp panned across a large pile of bones, some animal, some human, and a very old-looking small candle sitting on a natural stone shelf. This is the first thing that has scared me in as long as I can remember, but focusing my wits, I remembered that there was no other tracks in the cave and figured it was all from a long time ago. I was still a little uneasy as I exited the cave and was ready to get back to camp. As I came out into the light, about 75 feet away, there was the largest wolf I have ever seen that looked like it was coming down from standing on its hind legs. It dropped down to all fours on a rock, just began staring at me, not growling or baring its teeth, just staring. I pulled my .45 and fired 2 shots over the side of it to scare it away, but it didn't even flinch. Not only have I never seen a wolf in this part of northern Arizona, but I have never seen a wild animal that did not at least flinch at the sound of a gunshot. We both stood there staring at each other for a moment. I turned and set my backpack down to grab my binoculars and get a little closer look, but when I turned back, the wolf was gone. I made my way cautiously down the path back towards camp. I have encountered wolves before, and usually it's not the one wolf you can see that should worry you. It's the ones you can't see. So I was extra cautious for the return trip. Back at camp, I made sure my gun was fully loaded and got my recurve bow strung, just in case the wolves came back. I have seen plenty of predatory animals on my adventures. It's a part of being in the wilderness, so I wasn't too worried. Just prepared myself the best I could and went over to the lake to go fishing. Within about 20 minutes, I caught 2 of the biggest brown trout I've ever caught, so I decided to stop fishing for the day and take a swim. Back at camp, I made a fire, cleaned my trout, and made dinner while the sun went down. As soon as the sun went down, all of the life in the canyon seemed to go silent again. As I put out my fire and prepared for bed, I noticed there was a small flicker of light coming from the area where the cave I had explored earlier up the cliffside, which didn't make sense. It was a moonless night, and stars don't reflect that way. It couldn't have been the candle I had seen. It was too old and would not have burned so bright. I decided to keep my gun close and try to get some sleep. I would investigate the cave again the next day. When I woke at sunrise, there was a haze along the ground throughout the whole canyon floor, but as the sun rose it disappeared quickly, and the area came back to life. I made my breakfast, gathered my gun and bow, and headed back up towards the cave. When I reached the entrance, I saw there were still no tracks besides mine around the entrance and decided to push up the hill further. Just a little further up, I came upon the entrance to another cave, much smaller than the first one. There was a small flat landing with a large, heavily twisted juniper tree that to my absolute surprise had many small objects hanging from thin, old-looking ropes tied to the branches. There were bones, but there were also old things definitely made by humans, and looked like they were old Native American artifacts. Thinking I might have found the spot where the old man I met on the reservation had stayed when he was there decades ago, I went into the cave. This cave was much different from the first one. Just a few feet in, I noticed the walls were covered in what looked like ceremonial cave paintings. As I pushed further back, the cave got dramatically colder, much colder than it should have been, and the walls were completely covered with the paintings the entire way. When I reached the back of the cave, I was not prepared for what I saw. There was what looked like an old altar made of wood and bones. As I looked around, I saw that a little before the back of the cave, there was another shaft in the ceiling that went up, and on a ledge about 25 feet up sat the small figure of what appeared to be a woman. She was small and pale with her face painted white, and wearing something like a crown made of woven branches with two small antlers at the front. I stopped and stared for a few minutes, and the figure did not move, so I assumed that it was mummified remains from a long time ago. Not wanting to disturb a burial site, I turned to walk back out of the cave, but I began to walk. I heard what sounded like a faint voice in an unknown, ancient language. I instinctively looked back up towards the figure, but it was gone. I was immediately terrified and ran from the cave as fast as I could get out, but my headlamp flickered and died. I made my way out, feeling along the wall to find my way, and the whole way I felt like there was something right behind me. When I saw the first light from the cave entrance, I began to sprint towards it. Just before I made it out, I looked back and there was nothing, so I slowed down, but I could still hear the faint voice and the volume never changed. When I got outside, all the bones and artifacts hanging from the tree were gone. I ran down the path as fast as I could, headed back to my campsite by the lake. Just as I reached the floor of the canyon, I noticed the large wolf at the tree lean to my left, but this time it stayed standing upright on its hind legs. I stopped running, hoping to not initiate its predatory response to chase me, and again, it just stood there staring at me. I reached my campsite safely and immediately began packing up. It was too late in the day to make it out before dark, and I did not want to make the hike out at night with all that was going on. I moved my tent so it would back up to the canyon wall by the crack in the cliffside, so I didn't have to worry about anything sneaking up behind me. I built my fire much larger and knew I wasn't going to get any sleep that night. Just as the sun was going down, I began to hear noises coming from the trees, and I felt like I was being hunted. Finally, in the last light of day, I saw the wolf slowly walking around by where the path lead out of the trees, and it began to slowly walk towards me. This time I drew my gun and fired towards the creature intending to hit it, and while I saw a couple hit the dirt around it, several bullets hit it. Several rounds from a .45 will at least slow down anything I've ever encountered, but this giant wolf kept walking toward me like nothing had happened. I continued to fire at it until the inevitable click of an empty magazine. I reached down and fumbled around in my backpack looking for my other magazines to reload, and as I lifted it, the talisman the old woman gave me fell out onto the ground. I picked it up and put it around my neck and immediately remembered what she had told me. Dip your bullets in the white ash. I looked around but didn't see my backup magazines, so I grabbed my bow, pulled an arrow that was tipped with a hunting broadhead and dipped it into the white ashes, drew and fired. I hit the creature just in front of its right hip, and it let out a noise somewhere between a growl and a person screaming that made my blood curdle. I can hear that noise in my head to this day. It immediately turned and ran back to the trees, and in the flicker of the firelight, I saw the small women with the antler crown standing there waiting for it. They both retreated into the trees, and for the rest of the night, I could hear the same faint voice I had heard in the cave. I spent the night outside of my tent, as awake as I have ever been, but no longer afraid, and at dawn finished packing up so I could get out of that canyon. The next spring, I went back to the small group of houses on the Navajo reservation I had found the year before. I was wearing the talisman as a necklace, and the first person to greet me was the woman who had given it to me, and she ran up to give me a big hug. "You heard me," was all she said. I asked the group about the man who had given me the map, as I was almost desperate to talk to him about the experience I had so I could compare it to his own. They told me that he had disappeared shortly after I had visited them the first time and had not been back. Strangely, when I tried to tell them what had happened to me, no one would let me tell the story, and the oldest man there who sat in the corner kept mumbling the words, "Ye nald Lushii." We all once again sat and shared other stories of life and a meal. Before I left the next morning, I found the old woman who had given me the talisman and offered it back to her. She smiled and told me I had a good heart, then just closed my hands around it, telling me to keep it to watch over my next walkabout. I went back to that small village on the reservation several times over the next 10 years or so till I moved to Oregon, but they never let me tell them what happened. I never went back to the canyon, and while curiosity sometimes gets the best of me, I don't think I ever will. Second story. The night I saw Skinwalker. It was late October, a night when the wind howled through the trees like a restless spirit, and the moon hung low, casting long, eerie shadows over the desolate landscape. I was visiting my grandparents' ranch in New Mexico, nestled deep in the desert, miles from the nearest town. The ranch had always been a place of comfort for me, a place where I could escape the noise of the city and bask in the quiet solitude of the open land. But that night, something felt different, like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. "Hey, you ever hear those stories about skinwalkers?" My cousin Ethan asked, his voice breaking the silence as we sat by the fire pit outside. The flames flickered, casting a warm glow on our faces, but it did little to dispel the growing unease in my gut. "Skinwalkers?" I repeated, glancing over at him. His expression was serious, almost too serious for a kid who usually joked about everything. "Yeah," he said, lowering his voice as if the very mention of the word could summon something from the shadows. "They're these evil witches or spirits. I'm not really sure. They can shapeshift into animals, wolves, coyotes, whatever. But they're not just animals, you know? There's something else, something wrong." I chuckled nervously, trying to shake off the creepy feeling creeping up my spine. "Come on, Ethan. That's just some Navajo legend, right? Something to scare kids?" Ethan didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned closer to the fire, his eyes narrowing as he stared into the flames. "I wouldn't be so sure. My dad said he saw one once, out near the old cattle pens. Said it was a coyote, but when he looked into its eyes, he knew it wasn't just an animal. It was like it was looking into him, reading his thoughts or something." A shiver ran down my spine despite the warmth of the fire. "What happened?" "He backed away, slowly got the hell out of there. But he swears it followed him home that night. Heard scratching at the windows, like it was trying to get inside." Ethan paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. Said he heard it whispering his name. "Okay, enough." I forced a laugh, though my voice wavered. "You're just trying to freak me out." Ethan shrugged, a grim smile on his face. "Believe what you want. Just don't go wandering off alone tonight." We sat in silence for a while, the wind howling louder as the night grew darker. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was out there, just beyond the reach of the firelight. "I'm heading in," I said finally, standing up and brushing the dirt off my jeans. "It's getting cold." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the fire. "Yeah, good idea. I'll be right behind you." As I turned to head back to the house, I heard it, a low, guttural growl, so deep it seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath my feet. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan was already on his feet, his eyes wide with fear. "Don't move," he hissed. Whatever you do, don't run. The growl came again, closer this time. Slowly, I turned my head, my breath catching in my throat as I saw it. A pair of glowing eyes in the darkness, fixed on us with an intensity that sent a wave of pure terror through my body. The creature was massive, hunched over on all fours like a wolf, but there was something horribly wrong with it. Its limbs were too long, too distorted, and its fur was matted and filthy, almost like it was rotting away. And those eyes, they weren't the eyes of an animal. They were filled with malice, with a sick, twisted intelligence that made my blood run cold. "Get to the house now," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. We backed away slowly, never taking our eyes off the creature. It didn't move, just watched us, its growl rumbling through the night air like a warning. My heart raced as we reached the edge of the firelight, the safety of the house still too far away. And then, with a sudden, terrifying speed, the creature lunged forward. "Run!" Ethan shouted, grabbing my arm and yanking me toward the house. We sprinted across the yard, the sound of the creature's heavy breathing right behind us. I could hear its claws scraping against the ground, its growl turning into a savage snarl as it closed the distance between us. My legs burned, my lungs screamed for air, but I didn't dare slow down. The porch light was in sight, the old wooden steps just a few feet away. Ethan reached them first, throwing himself up the stairs and bursting through the door. I was right behind him, my hand outstretched, but just as I reached the steps, something sharp sliced across my ankle, sending me crashing to the ground. "Get up!" Ethan screamed from the doorway, but the pain was too intense. I looked back, and my heart stopped. The creature was right there, towering over me, its breath hot and rancid on my face. "Please," I whispered, barely able to speak. The creature tilted its head, almost as if it were curious, its glowing eyes narrowing. And then, to my horror, it began to change. Its fur receded, its limbs twisted and cracked, contorting into a grotesque parody of a human form. Within moments, it was standing upright, a tall, gaunt figure with skin so pale it seemed to glow in the dark. Its face was a nightmare, a twisted, elongated snout with sharp, jagged teeth, and those eyes, those terrible, glowing eyes that now looked disturbingly human. It leaned down, its face inches from mine, and I heard it speak in a low, rasping voice that made my skin crawl. "You shouldn't have come here," it whispered, its breath like ice against my skin. With a surge of adrenaline, I kicked out with my good leg, catching it off guard. It stumbled back, and I scrambled to my feet, half crawling, half running up the steps. Ethan grabbed me, pulling me inside just as the creature lunged again, its claws raking across the door as we slammed it shut. We collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath, our hearts pounding in our chests. The creature howled in rage, the sound echoing through the house, rattling the windows. We could hear it circling outside, its heavy footsteps crunching on the gravel as it stalked around the house, looking for a way in. "We need to call someone," I gasped, my voice trembling. "The police, anyone. Who's going to believe us?" Ethan said, his voice just as shaky. "They'll think we're crazy." We huddled together in the middle of the room, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, sending a fresh wave of fear through us. The creature's howls grew fainter, then stopped altogether. But we knew it was still out there, waiting, watching. "We can't stay here," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It'll get in eventually." Ethan nodded, but neither of us moved. We were too terrified, too paralyzed by the thought of what was waiting for us outside. Hours passed, though it felt like days, and the night dragged on in suffocating silence. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, we heard it, the soft padding of footsteps moving away from the house, disappearing into the distance. We waited until the sun was fully up, until the warmth of daylight filled the room, before we dared to move. Slowly, cautiously, we opened the door and stepped outside. The yard was empty. The only sign of what had happened, the deep gouges in the ground where the creature had stood. But I knew it wasn't over. The memory of those glowing eyes, that voice whispering in the dark, would haunt me forever. We never spoke of that night again, not to each other, not to anyone. But from that day on, I never went near the ranch at night, and I always kept a wary eye on the shadows, knowing that somewhere out there, the Skinwalker was waiting. And it knew my name. Third story. I work at a motel. I think Skinwalkers are staying here. If you're ever driving down Route 106 in Michigan, and you see a sign for the Greenbrier Motel, you better just keep on driving. Because there is something terribly wrong here, and the last thing I would want is for more people to die. I started working at the Greenbrier Motel a week ago. It wasn't a dream job by any standards. Night shift at the front desk, checking people in and out, doing some inventory in the back. I like the peace and quiet, though. As a little run-down motel on a stretch of isolated highway in Michigan, it gave me a lot of time to read and play computer games on the clock. It also helped that the owner, Frank, didn't seem to care I was a high school dropout with a rap sheet. But on the very first day, I felt that something was terribly off. For one, there was the smell. When the wind shifted, the entire parking lot smelled like rotting meat. I ran to close the windows, but even then I could still smell it, seeping in through the HVAC system. The motel is surrounded by deep woods, so I figured maybe we were near the kill grounds of some animal. Or maybe it was just the endless roadkill of deer and possums on the highway. Either way, it was unsettling, and definitely not enjoyable. The other thing that struck me as odd were the guest rooms. Some of them didn't have windows, and it seemed like that was intentional. I could see the lines in the paint, the seams outlining where windows had once been. When I asked Frank, he told me that some of the guests asked for windowless rooms, that they were in high demand. He didn't elaborate, and honestly, I was a little scared to press him on it. Things went from strange to downright creepy, however, as soon as Frank left. As I got set up at my desk, a woman walked into the room. She was in her 40s, maybe with black hair and very pale skin. As soon as she stepped inside, she locked the door behind her. "Frank left, right?" she asked me. "Yeah," I replied. Who are you?" She introduced herself as Matilda. She'd been working here for a decade, cleaning the motel rooms after the guests checked out. After a few minutes of small talk, she suddenly came up to the counter and lowered her voice. "I want to make sure you're safe around here," she said, glancing back towards the door nervously. "So, I need you to listen to me." "Okay." My heart dropped. Okay. Whatever you do, don't ask questions. Just check people in, check them out, and mind your own business. And then you'll be fine." My stomach did a little flip. Okay, so it was that kind of motel. Illegal business of multiple kinds, probably, all being conducted under our dilapidated roof. Well, what if the police come? Will I be arrested too? She gave me a blank stare. The police? Say they find evidence of illegal activity in one of the rooms. Will that get me in trouble? I already have shoplifting on my record and can't. She shook her head. "Don't worry about the police. Just don't ask questions. And don't make eye contact or look at their faces for too long." I swallowed. They don't want witnesses. They don't want me to be able to pick them out of a lineup. I thought, okay, I won't ask questions, and I won't look at them for too long. Got it? She smiled at me. You have nothing to worry about. As it turned out, though, I had quite a lot to worry about. That night, I checked in 3 people. They were almost like caricatures. A big, strong guy in sunglasses that looked like he'd stepped right out of The Godfather. A woman dressed to the nines, wearing a more makeup than a clown. A skinny young guy in a hoodie that smelled of something chemical and strange. But I listened to Matilda. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even ask the questions I should have been asking. Like when hoodie guy gave me an ID that was clearly fake. Don't ask questions and you'll be fine. I kept repeating that to myself, and I kept my eyes glued to the computer screen, never even glancing up at them. When it hit midnight, I assumed the rest of the night would be smooth sailing. On this lonely stretch of highway, it was unlikely anyone else would check in. I pulled up Minesweeper and played some music on my phone. My peace and quiet, however, was interrupted by the door swinging open. At 2 a.m., I glanced up to see the guy in sunglasses, the guy who looked like he'd stepped out of The Godfather. Oh no, I should have locked the door. I swallowed and kept my eyes glued to the computer screen as he approached. Can I help you? I asked, watching him in my peripheral vision. Do you have any razors for purchase? I froze. Razors? At 2 a.m.? I instantly got a mental image of him slashing someone up in his room. Blood all over the sheets, soaking into the carpet. No, we don't have any razors, I said, keeping my eyes on the computer screen. Can you just check in the back, please? I swallowed. I really didn't want to go check. As soon as I turned around, he could do anything. Pull out a gun, tackle me, force me into a chokehold, and keep me hostage. But refusing him was just as bad, if not worse. It might make him mad, really mad. I sat there, staring at Minesweeper on the screen, weighing my options, paying close attention to him out of the corner of my eye. And that's when I saw it. There was something off about this guy. His sunglasses looked like they were slightly too low on his face. Like the eyes they were covering weren't in quite the right place. And not only that, but I couldn't see his eyebrows poking above the frames or the contours of his brow ridge. Everything above the glasses was perfectly flat and smooth, like he had no eye sockets at all. Can you check in the back, please? He asked again, his voice taking on an annoyed tone. Why, yes. Sure. I sprung out of the seat and ducked into the back storage area. I quickly glanced over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't following me, but he wasn't. I had half a mind to just stay there, hiding out in the back storage room, until I heard his voice calling me. Did you find them? He sounded angry, approaching furious. Thankfully, I did find a few packaged razors next to some spare toothbrushes and soap we kept. I grabbed them and handed them over, keeping my eyes trained on the floor. Thank you, he said, sounding pleased. And that was it. He turned around and left. As soon as the door shut, I ran over and locked it. I closed the blinds and sat back down at the front desk, my heart hammering in my chest. All I could picture were the strange contours of his face. And as I sat there, I realized something. All 3 guests that I'd checked in since the start of my shift, the Godfather guy, the makeup woman, the hoodie guy, had something covering their face or head. I mean, I wasn't exaggerating about the woman having enough makeup for a clown. She was wearing foundation so thick that it cracked around the corners of her eyes and lips, and wore false eyelashes so long they gave the appearance of spider legs. And hoodie guy had kept his hood pulled so tightly over his head that his ears and hair weren't visible. It was like they all had something to hide. Morning couldn't come soon enough. As soon as the day shift workers arrived, I got the hell out of there. I floored it back to my house and slept for a long time, my sleep plagued with nightmares of faceless people and spidery eyelashes. Then it was time to go back to the motel for night number 2. Thankfully, it was a quieter night. Although the vacancy sign glowed brightly in the darkness, no one checked in during my shift. They must have all come earlier during the day's shift. I locked the door, sat down with a cup of coffee, and enjoyed getting some reading done in the quiet. Unfortunately, the quiet didn't last long. Around midnight, I heard a loud slam from outside. I threw my book down and ran over to the window. The door to room 16 was wide open. I looked around. Nobody appeared to be outside. The parking lot and the sidewalk were empty. The room itself was dark. None of the lights were on. I walked over to the computer and looked up the room. To my surprise, no one had booked it for tonight. Should I go out and close the door? I hesitated. It was late. There was no one around, except for the occasional passing car. If someone had broken into that room and then attacked me, there would be no one to hear me scream. So I kept the door locked tight and accessed the security camera feed instead. As I rewound it, I saw what happened. The door had opened, and then a woman had walked out of it. I couldn't see her face, just her long dark hair. She then disappeared into room 22. I checked room 22 on the computer and saw it was booked to a woman named Cassandra Johnson. I frowned. Looked like Cassandra might be going into our vacant rooms and possibly stealing stuff. Matilda must have forgotten to lock up the room after she cleaned it. I sighed, opened the door, and began walking towards the open room. I thought of knocking on room 22, but then thought better of it. Keep your nose out of other people's business. I just lock up room 16 and go back to the lobby like a good little employee. I walked towards to the open room, but as soon as I got close, a horrible smell wafted out of the room, like something rotting, decaying. My stomach turned. What did Cassandra do in there? Throw up? Stash all her garbage in there? I reached into the darkness of the room. Bracing myself, I flicked on the light. The room looked normal. The bed was made. The carpet was clean, but the smell had only intensified. I pinched my nose as I glanced around, starting to feel nauseous. And then I saw it. There was something on the carpet, just barely poking out from the other side of the bed. What is that? It was tan and folded over itself, like a beige sheet or pillowcase had been bunched up on the other side. But all our sheets were white. I stepped into the room, my heart pounding in my chest. "Hello," I called out. Nothing. The smell got even worse as I approached the bed. Nausea washed over me. I forced myself to keep going, pinching my nose, swallowing down the urge to throw up. I peered over the side of the bed and froze. There was a pile of beige, slightly translucent material folded over itself on the other side. But I instantly recognized certain shapes attached to it. Awfully familiar shapes, like 5 fingers, resembling a glove made of skin, poking out from under one of the folds. It looked like someone had shed their skin. I stepped back, my legs shaking underneath me. No. There's no way. It can't be. I backed away towards the door, my throat dry, because it didn't make sense. It didn't even make sense with a horrible crime. There wasn't any blood on it. It hadn't been cut off someone. It was like a snake's skin, clean and perfect, holding the shape of its wearer like a ghost. I ran out of the room and saw, walking towards me down the sidewalk, the woman from room 22. Strands of her dark, straight hair hung over her face. But I could tell, through her hair, that there was something wrong with her face. Her eyes, her lips were in slightly the wrong position. She strode towards me fast, her shoes clicking on the pavement. I didn't want to find out what she'd do if she caught me. I whipped around and ran as fast as I could. I could hear her behind me, but I forced myself to go faster and faster until I was inside the lobby. I clicked the lock shut and collapsed in the back room, where she couldn't see me. That's when the whistling started. Just outside the door, I could hear her, whistling. The source of the sound shifted as she circled the lobby area, looking for a way in. I heard it at the door, then at the back, then through the side windows, then back at the front door. This went on for an hour. Finally, the whistling faded, but I didn't move. I stayed there, huddled in the back storage room, until dawn broke. As soon as the day's shift arrived, I booked it out of there as fast as I could. I wanted to quit. With everything I am, I wanted to just walk away. But I needed the money. I already knew how hard it was finding a job with a rap sheet. It was either go back to the job or face eviction. So I went back. When I got on shift, though, I pulled Matilda aside and told her what I'd seen. I asked her again and again if my life was in danger. Asked her what the hell was going on here, if other people were in danger too. I promise you, as long as you mind your own business, you'll be safe. So that's what I did. I minded my own business. And for the next few days, nothing of note happened. Sure, there were a few people who checked in that were wearing hats or sunglasses or extra makeup, but I just tried to avoid eye contact with them. Try to keep my head down and my nose out of other people's business. But then came the night of November 14th. It was raining that night. The rain came down in sheets, and every so often, I heard a peal of thunder shake the windows. I wasn't expecting anyone to come in that night, as I hadn't seen that many cars driving by on the highway. The rain seemed to keep everybody in, but then I heard a knock. When I looked up, I saw a man staring in the window. A chill ran down my spine. He was wearing a hoodie that hid his head and kept his face mostly in shadow. And he was rather aggressively banging on the window, like he was in a hurry. I grabbed the mace I kept under the counter and slipped it into my pocket. Then I approached the window. "Do you have any vacancies?" he asked in a low voice, barely audible above the pounding rain. The vacancy sign glowed brightly behind him. There's no way he could have missed it. "Yeah, come on in," I said, unlocking the door with one hand and gripping the mace in my pocket with the other. He stepped inside. Rain dripped off his jacket and onto the floor. I barely glanced at him, turning around and walking back around the counter. Then I sat down at the computer, keeping my eyes fixed on the screen. In my peripheral vision, I could see him, leaning over the counter, his face only about a foot or two from mine. So close that I could smell the stale, mothball odor coming off his clothes. So close I could hear drops of water plopping onto the counter from his sleeve. "Can you go faster?" he asked, his voice raspy in his throat. "Sorry, sir. I'm going fast as I can," I replied, my heart starting to pound. It's an old computer. My fingers slipped on the mouse as I rushed to click the buttons. "I don't have all day," he growled, looming even closer to me. I wanted to look at him. My eyes were itching to glance up at the man that was 6 inches from my face. But I forced myself to stare at the screen. Whatever the hell was going on here, I was not going to be a witness. I was not going to look up and find myself face to face with a Smith & Wesson. "Your name?" I asked. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I froze. I needed a name to book the room. That's all. But maybe he wouldn't see it that way. Maybe I wasn't supposed to ask for names. Maybe that was part of Frank's understanding with certain guests. Thankfully, nothing happened. After a second of hesitation, he replied, "Daniel Jones." The name struck me as fake. Common first name, common last name. But who even cared at this point? I typed his name into the system and completed the booking process. He paid for the room in cash, which was another unnerving detail, but I tried not to worry about it. I turned my back and took a key off the hook. Room 7, I said, handing it to him. He thanked me and then waited by the door. I waited for a minute, then 2, but he didn't leave. Do you need something? I asked, careful not to make eye contact. Can you escort me to my room? Oh, hell no. There was no way I could go out there, in the middle of the night, with this creepy guy. That was like a death sentence. I glanced out the window and spotted his car, a beat-up sedan, in one of the nearby parking spaces. The murder scenario played out in my head. Shoves me into the hotel room, kills me, sticks my body in the trunk, throws it in the middle of the woods. Or maybe worse, maybe my skin would end up crumpled on the floor of one of the rooms. Maybe he'd take my form, or turn me into something that sheds its skin like a snake, that has eyes too low on its face, or no eye sockets at all. And the longer I looked at him, in the corner of my eye, the more I noticed how unsavory he looked. There were smears of dirt on his sleeves and on the hem of his pants. Like he's been digging a grave, the voice in my head added. His face, half hidden in shadow, was sunken and gaunt. His jaw was covered in gray stubble, and his teeth were a horrible shade of grayish yellow. Can't you just go yourself? I have something that I need to do here. My boss is going to be mad. You can take 2 minutes to walk me to my room. Damn it. I sat there in stunned silence. He sounded furious. My heart pounded in my ears. Okay, I said finally. My fingers curled around the mace in my pocket, and then I joined him by the door. I'll walk you to your room. He didn't thank me. He just grabbed the door and swung it open, nearly letting it swing back in my face. I stepped out into the pouring rain with him. The parking lot was a lake, and our feet sloshed loudly through the water. The cold water seeped through my sneakers, and I shivered. I followed the man to his car, staying a good 15 feet away. He popped the trunk, and I held my breath, but thankfully there was only a duffel bag inside. He hoisted it on his shoulder and started for room 7. I followed him at a distance, staying several feet away, watching him fidget with the key. You got a lot of other people staying here right now? He asked as he slid the key into the lock. Some, I replied. Not great weather for it. Not really. The storm's supposed to clear tomorrow. It'll be good weather then. Wow, this is taking a while, I thought to myself. That's when I looked down at his hands and noticed that he wasn't really trying to get into his room. He was just inserting the key, pausing, and then pulling it out. Over and over again. He was stalling for time. He was keeping me here on purpose. I looked up from his hands, just in time to see him staring at me. His blue eyes were intense, studying me. I wanted to run away. Every inch of me was screaming to get out of there. But the guy had 6 inches on me and was really thin. He'd probably catch me in seconds. I was never much of a runner. I slipped my hand in my pocket, curling my fingers around the mace. Do you need help getting into your room? I asked. He shook his head. I'm going to go back to the front desk, I said, taking a step back. As soon as I said that, he froze. His eyes widened as he stared at me. Slowly, he shook his head, his lips stretching into a grimace that revealed his yellowed teeth. Don't go, he growled, his voice barely audible above the rain. Stay exactly where you are. I leapt into action. I whipped the mace out of my pocket and held it in front of me, pointing it right at him. Don't get any closer. My finger hovered over the trigger, and then I heard it. Someone was whistling. Behind me, somewhere in the rain, the song cut through the pattering raindrops like a knife. It was the same eerie tune that woman had whistled a few days ago. I'm sorry, the man said quietly, his blue eyes locked on mine. But I needed bait. I stared at him. My brain couldn't even process what he was saying. Bait? I took a stumbling step back. The whistling grew louder. I whipped around, through the rain, I could see someone walking through the parking lot, barely lit by the flickering street lamp. The mace fell from my hands and clattered to the ground. Then I turned and ran as fast as I could towards the lobby. The whistling stopped, and then I could hear loud, splashing footsteps growing louder with every second behind me. I swung the door open, slammed it shut, and turned the lock. I pulled the blinds down over the window. Panting, I parted them with my fingertips and peered out into the night. There was a woman standing in the parking lot, the same woman I had seen a week ago. Her hair and clothes were drenched with rain, but she was smiling, this big, lopsided grin that sent chills down my spine. And her eyes were strange, wide and wild, incredibly light blue. In the darkness, it almost looked like she didn't have irises at all. Just two pinholes for pupils staring right at my door. No. She took a step forward. I ran over to my desk, grabbed my cell phone, started dialing 911. Come on. 911. What's your emergency? I'm at the Greenbrier Motel, and there's this guy, and this weird woman. Thump. I was cut off by a loud thump nearby. I ran to the window and peered out. The man who'd booked room 7 was running towards the woman. He was holding something up in the air, a short dagger, gleaming silver in the rain. He's attacking her. I screamed into the phone. The woman's face changed. Her features twisted. Her grin crept up to her eyes. Her arms crackled and stretched. She blinked, and her eyes turned pure white. Her body twisted unnaturally at the waist so that she was facing the man. With fast, jolted movements, she leapt at him. Within seconds, he was dead. She stood on all fours above him, her knees bent the wrong way, her fingers far too long. With another horrible crackling sound, her neck stretched out 2 feet long, twisting and serpentine. And then she looked at me. I leapt away from the window with a scream. "What's happening?" the operator asked me. "Sir, please tell me what's happening." I opened my mouth, tried to speak, but only a squeaking sound came out. By the time I made it back over to the window, the woman was standing there, looking down at her kill. She looked normal. Then she stepped over his body and walked towards the rooms. To my horror, she pulled out a key and opened room 22. Then she disappeared inside. The police arrived a few minutes later. In strings of gibberish, I begged them to check room 22, that something horrible was lurking inside. But then they knocked on the door. A completely normal-looking woman opened it. I watched from the lobby. I couldn't hear that much of their conversation over the pouring rain, but they weren't arresting her, weren't accusing her. They seemed to just be having a friendly conversation, asking her what she'd seen. Then they thanked her and came back to me. "We'll need to see the security tapes from tonight, please," the officer said in an accusing tone. But when I showed them the tapes, they got quiet. One of the officers made a call to someone, saying something about an infestation. The other 2 officers ushered me out into the lobby, their faces grim. They told me not to leave as they talked among themselves in hushed voices in the corner of the room. Then they approached. "You didn't see anything tonight," the tall man said, leaning in close. "You got that?" But what about?" "Listen to me very carefully," he interrupted, lowering his voice. "You didn't see anything. Just like you never shoplifted in your life." "What? You understand me?" he asked. The silence stretched out between us. "Yeah, I got it," I said, my voice wavering. "I didn't see anything. I left the motel and never went back. I planned to never speak of what I saw, to keep my mouth shut, just like they told me to. But after losing many nights of sleep, I realized that I need to warn people. I need to warn you. I can't have another person dying because of these things, whatever they are. So, I beg you, If you're driving through Michigan and see that there's a vacancy at the Greenbrier Motel, keep driving. Fourth story. I think my girlfriend's a skinwalker. Eyes on the road, Max? Abby teased, "You're gonna crash." I barely dodged a car speeding towards us as I re-entered our lane. "Sorry, I couldn't keep my eyes off of you," I joked, trying to hide my nervousness. "I know," Abby said, "but you'll have plenty of time for that later." My face grew hot. We arrived at Oak Ridge Woods, parking in the lot before we both took out our camping equipment. We wouldn't have to walk long. Only about 40 minutes on a thin trail left for campers leading into a small clearing. "You ready to get going?" I asked, smiling at Abby. "Can't wait," she replied, grinning back. We headed towards a trail and began to walk into the woods. It was a sunny and peaceful day, and we had planned on spending several nights here. It had taken us both a while to get the time off of work and plan the trip, so we did not want anything to jeopardize our fun. I looked up at Abby. "It's awfully quiet," she said, staring forwards. "I wonder why." She was always one to worry. "It's okay, it could just mean there's coyotes nearby or something. Or maybe they're just scared of a 5 feet 10 inches girl with dark brown hair dash." "Oh, shut up," Abby said, punching my side, and we continued to walk in laughter. But she was right. It was unusually quiet, and there seemed to be an almost palpable dread floating in the air. When we reached the clearing, we were surprised to see another tent. We had never seen another camper camp in our spot since we started coming here yearly, but there was enough space for us both anyways. "Hello," Abby said. "Is anyone home?" She began to walk towards the tent, and I walked with her. "Strange," she said, running her hand across some tiers in the tent and peering into the mess inside. "Maybe they're just out hiking." Yeah, you're probably right," I said, ignoring the lacerations. The tent wasn't completely run down, so maybe it was just old. Who knows how many times it's been used. "We should probably get some firewood. I'm starving," Abby chimed. "All right," I said, my eyes lingering on the tent before moving away. I headed into the forest, grabbing sticks and logs along the way before bringing them back. "We'll need more than that," Abby said. "I was hoping we could stay up and tell scary stories dash." "Oh," I said, raising my hands in feigned fright, and she rolled her eyes as I headed back out. It was growing dark, and I had to go deeper into the woods to find useful firewood. But the deeper I went, the stranger the smells became, and the quieter the woods around me grew. "What in the hell is that smell?" I said aloud. It smelled of rotten eggs, and with each step I took, the smell intensified. I began to look around for the source of the smell, but all I could see were shadows in the dim dawn light. That's when I heard him. "W, who's there?" My head snapped towards the sound, but I couldn't find its owner. "W, who's there?" Someone said again, his words sounding oddly similar to when he said it previously. "Hello?" I asked. "W, who's there?" "My name is Max. Me and my girlfriend are camped out next to you, I think." I said, "Try to be polite." "W, who's there?" The voice came again. I began to grow nervous. Something wasn't right about his voice, and why was he repeating the same words? "Well, I'm going to head back now. I'll see you there, maybe," I said, backing away, and as I did I saw two yellow, glowing eyes, but surely it was just my imagination. "Got the firewood?" Abby asked. "Yep, and I think I ran into the man who's staying in that tent." "You think?" Abby questioned. "Yeah, it was too dark to see him, but he asked me who's there, so I told him we're in the tent next to him." I made sure to leave out the strange details, knowing how paranoid Abby can be, but she still seemed nervous. "And he didn't introduce himself?" "Well, no dash. And you didn't even see his face. How do you know he's even that camper?" I looked towards the ground. "We'll be fine, Abby," I said. "Even if he wasn't, it was just some guy probably camping somewhere nearby." Yeah, you're right," Abby sighed. Sorry for bombarding you with questions. My nerves have just been on haywire since we got here, like there's something weird messing with me in the air. I know, and you're good. Let's just try to have a good time, I said, hugging her from the side. We stuffed our faces with s'mores and bratwurst before Abby began her storytelling. There was once a young and cute couple, just like the one sitting before you today. We grinned at one another, our night filled with laughter and fun. This is amazing, Eb, I said, holding on to her tight. Yeah, Max, I love Dash. A guttural scream cut her words off, then another and another. Help me! A woman's scream. Help me! I was instantly on my feet. Max! Abby cried, unsure. We have to see if she's all right. I screamed, already running towards the woods. And Max, wait. Something's not right. But I ignored her, my feet pounding on the soft floor and only growing in fervency as I heard another scream. I could hear Abby behind me. She cried for me to stop and wait, but I couldn't just leave someone who may be hurt. Then Abby screamed. I turned to see her fall. She let out another scream of pain as she grabbed onto her ankle, tears flowing down her cheeks. Damn it, Abby cried, holding on her leg. Fuck, it hurts, fuck. I ran up to Abby and grabbed her shoulder. Fuck, Abby, are you okay? My head lowered to meet her gaze, and I saw a flash of anger course through her, but it quickly subsided. Leave me and see if that damn girl needs help. She screamed before pushing me. But you, Dash, I started. Go, Max. She screamed. That was always like Abby, worrying about other people before herself. I gave her one last glance before turning and running towards the screams. I'll be right back, Ub, I cried without looking back at her. I ran through the trees, their dark shapes blurring past me. The rotten smell grew and grew as I approached the cries. My heart pounded, my lungs cried, tears flowed out of my eyes, and that is when I saw it in the clearing. At first I kept running, not paying attention to the lone deer in a small clearing of trees. That was until it opened its mouth, opened it impossibly wide, a crack of bones accompanying its opening as the jaw unhinged, the creature taking in a long and deep breath, the moonlight peering onto it so I could witness its horror. Then the creature let out a woman's scream. Its mouth did not move, it just hung open, letting out scream after scream after scream. Slowly, the creature turned its head to look at me, the moonlight sparkling its glowing yellow eyes, and that is when I got a good look at it. It was not a deer. The creature looked like a deer, but its antlers were impossibly long, stretching out like the branches of a tree. Half of its face was missing, showing its long and sharp teeth that were painted red. Visible ribs peeked out of its underside, and its back legs were far too long with 2 joints instead of just 1. The creature's mouth began to vibrate at first, then violently shake and crack before opening wide again. And this time its scream was one I knew. It let out Abby's scream, the scream she made when she rolled her ankle. I began to back away, my heart pounding so hard I had to grab my chest to ensure it wouldn't break through. My mind was spinning and spinning. How the hell was something like this possible? And then I noticed what it had been hunched over, what the creature was eating. Tears flowed down my face as I stared in horror at the woman the creature had been eating, her throat bloodied and stomach cut open, her eyes facing towards me as if staring at me in terror. I began to cry, my whole body shaking, the fear unbearable as the creature's mouth began to shake again before it let out its next words. W, who's there? It said. I needed to run, I needed to leave. W, who's there? My legs wouldn't move, they were clamped tightly together. Move, please. Then the creature began to rise onto its 2 legs, slowly. It stood tall, then taller, and taller until it was over 7 feet tall. My legs trembled, but would not run. My heart began to slow, begging to stop. I did not breath. I did not take my eyes off the thing. Its mouth cracked open. "I'll be right back up," it said in my voice. I crashed through the woods, flying past the trees even faster than before. The creature let out a scream, the woman's scream. My feet and chest burned as I ran back towards Abby, praying that she would be safe. What if there was another creature? What if it was trying to separate us? I had no time to think. My feet pounded harder and harder until I reached the breaking of the trees. I ran to our tent and flung the door open. Abby sat there wide-eyed and holding onto her hurt leg. "God damn, you scared me, Max Dash," Abby started. "We're leaving. Now!" I screamed. "What?" "We have to leave. Pack up, fuck." "Don't even pack anything, we have to go now." Okay, Max, but you'll have to dash." I heard a scream outside the tent, a scream that was getting closer. "Let's go," I cried. "Max," I dashed. The creature let out another scream, and I began to exit the tent, Abby right behind me. "Go, Max!" she screamed, and I took off towards the car. I sprinted out of the tent, not daring to even look around for the creature. I could hear Abby running behind me. "Go, Dash!" Abby screamed behind me. My heart was racing. My breath was shallow. "Just to the car, we just had to make it to the car." "Go, Dash!" Abby screamed. "Go, Dash!" Abby screamed. "Go, Dash!" That is when it clicked. Abby couldn't be behind me. Abby couldn't run. She had hurt her ankle. Hurt it when I was chasing after that woman. And she had said, "Go, Max." The thing behind me was not Abby. Abby was still at the tent. I halted my run and spun around, my face full of despair after being fooled, tears welling in my eyes. I did not care if the creature killed me. I did not care what it would do. I needed to get back to Abby. A long arm emitted from the darkness. Then another. The creature was crawling towards me, but it was not the same one I had seen before. There was more than one. It was much smaller, and its head was tilted to the side, staring up at me with its glowing, yellow eyes. Its mouth cracked open, this one looking much more human, and it began to let out a laugh. I ran past it and did not hear its footsteps behind me. I continued to run back towards the clearing, back towards Abby, dreading what I might see. But when I got to the tent, Abby sat there alone and safe, but crying. She was covering her face, tears rolling down her hands and soaking the tent floor. "Abby," I dashed. "How could you just leave me here? Leave me all alone?" She cried and then went totally silent. I tried to apologize and tell her that I had been fooled, but she couldn't look me in the eyes. The shock, the seemingly betrayal, the fear, all of her emotions were erupting from her body, and she could not control them. "Let's go, Abby," I said, lifting her to her feet. Weeks have passed since that fateful night, and Abby has hardly spoken to me since. The hurt in her eyes when she looks at me, her skin still pale with fear, the way she seems to have been losing weight from stress. From stress, right? She's also been acting strangely. Sometimes, I'll catch her twitching her arms alone in our room, rolling her head from side to side, her jaw shaking open just like the creature on that day. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to hurt her anymore, so I ignored it. After work today, I peered into our bedroom window. Yes, spying on her is wrong, but I was seriously worried. Abby was standing in our room, staring at herself in the mirror. Her skin seemed loose on her body almost. She raised one arm, her body moving unnatural, as if she wasn't used to her limbs. She began to crack her arm into place, then her legs, then her jaw shot open. "Hello, hello, hello," She repeated over and over as if testing her voice. You are. We are. We. She continued. I love you, Max. She practiced. My heart dropped. Oh, she said, then her head shot towards the window. I jumped back at her sudden gaze. Her eyes were the size of ping-pong balls as she glared at me. Were they yellow? I ran towards the door and walked inside. Is everything all right? Abby questioned as I walked through the door. Yeah, everything's going good. I lied. That night I laid frozen in bed. Abby wasn't even under my arm. She was Abby, right? She had to be. I turned off the light on our bedside. I love you, Max, Abby said, mastering those words. I woke up to spiderwebs covering my face. No, not spiderwebs, hair. I could feel someone breathing inches from my face. It was Abby. She was on top of me, her face inches from mine. I was scared. I didn't want to confront her, or whatever she was. I recoiled at her tongue that went across the sweat on my face. Her breath smelled of blood. Can't, Abby said, I see can't. And with those words, she leaped out of the bed, and I finally opened my eyes, watching as she sprinted out of our room. Her body moved unnaturally, her hands flailing in the air as she ran, and neck loopy as if too weak to support her head. She looked utterly terrifying, but Abby was still in there. The girl I loved was running away. I chased after her, but stopped as I passed the entrails of a dog that scattered our floor. I could see the dog's head, disembodied on the floor, a half-eaten foot and body, its blood and guts covering the floor. Did she do this? The door slammed open, then closed. Abby was gone, and somehow, I knew she was gone for good. I cleaned up the mess before calling the police and telling them that Abby was acting strange and had gone missing. They questioned and searched but could not find her. Nobody could. Except rumors were going around of a dark-haired lady in the woods, one that used soothing words to lure people to their demise. The same woods where we saw those creatures. Abby, if you're out there, please come home. I know you're still in there, and I will save you. I packed my bags and loaded a gun. Not for Abby, but for those other creatures. I will find her, and I will make things right again. If you don't hear from me, do not look for me. I do not want anyone else to suffer the way we have. I do not want anyone else to become a monster. I found an email sent to me the other day, and tears filled my eyes as I saw it was an audio message from Abby. I will play it here for you, and to Abby, here I come. My name is Abby Ray Johnson, and it would seem that maybe I am becoming a monster. It all started a couple of weeks ago in a place called Oakdale Woods. Me and Max were dating for 4 years now, and had gone here yearly to camp and hang out, which is why we were visiting again. But instantly, I knew something wasn't right. There was a strange smell, and as we walked the trail towards the campsite, I heard a faint voice whisper, "Help me," but I had just thought my imagination was running wild. We had fun, and I had just finished telling Max a scary story when we heard the scream. There was a woman screaming her lungs out in the woods. Max sprinted after her, and I sprinted with him, trying to tell him to wait, trying to tell him that something wasn't right. How her words sounded the exact same, and as if coming from a radio. I didn't believe there was actually anyone in danger. Maybe some sort of trick? But Max ran anyway, faster and faster, and I continued, trying to keep up. When I tripped, a root caught my ankle, and my ankle went a full 90 degrees before I crashed to the floor. I don't think I've ever screamed so loud. Max ran towards me asking if I was all right, but boy was I angry. So angry that it took everything in me not to punch him. But luckily another scream brought me to my senses, and I shouted at him to go and help whoever had been hurt. After finding a branch and limping back to the tent, I laid there trying to catch my breath when Max burst through the door panting and wide-eyed before telling me we were leaving. I tried to tell him I would need his help, that I couldn't run to the car on my own, but I don't think he heard me. So he took off, leaving me there, all alone. Despite how it sounds, I don't blame him for leaving me there. I know he was scared, confused, and that he did not notice I wasn't running behind him, because as he ran away, I heard my own voice, the same words I had spoken earlier. Go, Max. And he listened. What I don't know is how he didn't hear my screams. Moments after he left the tent, I saw a face peek through the tent, a face that I still fear thinking about now. The face of a rotted, almost human-shaped deer with large antlers on the side of its head. Its mouth opened in a smile as it stared at me, hurt and limp, and it raised its arm towards me. Something wasn't right, though. There was something wriggling underneath its skin. That is when it stabbed me with its hand going through my stomach. Pain shot through my body like a laser, and I immediately began to cough up blood. I could feel something whirring and twisting inside of me, tendrils flowing to each limb, then reaching up and up towards my brain. It was strange. Although I felt the immense pain, I didn't feel like I was dying. I felt calm as the organism reached up towards my brain and began to latch itself onto it. The creature ran from the tent as I heard Max scream for me, and I looked down to see the hole in my abdomen had closed. Strange, I muttered before Max barged into the tent, and tears of shock and anguish finally began to roll down my face. I could tell things were different when we got home. Even I knew I was acting strangely. It was as if I was just a spectator, watching my body as it practiced human words, watching as it cracked our bones in a human shape, watching its skin grow droopy until it ate. I watched it hunt down squirrels and stray cats. I even watched as it grabbed my neighbor's dog, a medium-sized poodle that trusted me with all its heart. It licked my face as I brought it to our house. It was happy, so trusting even as I raised my hands towards its neck. But when I began to bar my teeth, lower them towards Max's throat as he slept, I could no longer watch. It took all my strength, but instead of biting down on his neck, I licked at his face. "Can," I muttered. "I see can't dash." I could not hurt my love, and when he woke up and the thought of him seeing me standing over him made me feel ashamed, so very, very ashamed of what I had become. The shame was overpowering. I could do nothing but run. I am at an internet cafe now, and I am recording this on my phone. Max has called me dozens of times, but I will not pick up. I try to stab myself with a knife, but I am no longer in control of my body. The knife stopped inches from my throat. I need to go back there. I need to hide in those woods and find answers so maybe I can reverse what I've become. But most of all, I need to hide so that I do not hurt anyone or anything anymore. My dearest Max, if you or anyone sees me in Oak Ridge Woods, please, I am begging you, shoot me. I am no longer in control. The thing patrolling in my body is no longer Abby. It is a vicious demon that only exists to hunt, torment, and kill. Please kill me before I harm anyone else. It is the only way that I will be able to rest in peace. Please, please. Fifth story. My wife heard a skinwalker in our house last night. Let me start off by saying that my wife doesn't believe in paranormal entities or anything of that nature. We have 3 cats, and one of them likes to be a rebel, jumping onto counters and meowing at the top of his lungs just looking for attention. He does this throughout the night, and it's a regular occurrence. Last night, after a few beers and video games, I decided it was time to head to bed with my wife. When I woke up this morning, my wife was basically attached to me with wide eyes and a nervous look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell me what happened last night. She said that around 2:50 in the morning, She was woken up to a noise that sounded like one of our cats downstairs meowing unusually loud. After giving herself a few seconds to perk up and fully pay attention, she said that the meows sounded more like a person trying to mimic a cat, and it kept saying hello. After meowing for 2 to 3 minutes, a loud bang came at our door, and then a notification went off for a motion sensor at our front door. When she told me this, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a notification for motion detected at 2:52 a.m. I asked her why she didn't wake me up so I could grab my gun. She said she was frozen with fear, and I didn't want it to hear her make a noise. We're out running errands while I'm typing this, but something made me uncomfortable about her story. Last night, I set the home security alarm around 9 p.m., and we didn't turn it off till we walked the dog this morning. To make things worse, we had slept with all of the animals in the room, and the door was closed. So whatever was in our house or outside the front door was not one of our animals. Obviously, the first thing that came to my mind was a skinwalker, but maybe I'm just being paranoid. I checked all the rooms in the house after I got up. I'm not sure what I could have done anyways. It's very odd that my wife was scared so badly by something she doesn't necessarily believe in. We bought this house brand new, so no one has lived here before. When I'm home alone, I do feel like I'm being watched or someone's always walking directly behind me. My wife also said that the house has given her chills since we moved in. Something is just off about it. We just got home, and I went to hang up one of my shirts in the master bedroom closet when I noticed that the board that covers the attic access has been shifted a little. When I asked my wife about it, she said she's never been up there, and the builders would have placed it back in its original place before we made the purchase. I'm genuinely getting anxious just thinking about what could be going on. Has anyone had an experience like this? Or similar at least? We're going to my mother-in-law's to get some sage. My wife said burning it should keep whatever's around our house away. Sixth story. I saw a skinwalker. It was a few years back during a road trip with my buddy Jake. We were cruising through the desert, chasing that feeling of freedom you only get on the open road. But little did we know, we were about to encounter something that would shatter that sense of freedom and leave us fighting for our lives. We were driving through Navajo territory, miles away from civilization, when we saw it, a figure standing by the side of the road, illuminated by the headlights of our car. At first, we thought it was just a trick of the light, but as we got closer, we realized it was something else entirely. It looked like a man, but there was something off about him. His eyes glowed in the darkness, and his limbs seemed too long, too twisted. And then, just as quickly as we saw him, he vanished into the desert night. We tried to shake it off, telling ourselves it was just our imaginations running wild. But as we continued down the road, things took a turn for the worse. We started hearing strange noises outside the car, scratching at the windows, whispers on the wind. Jake laughed it off, but I could tell he was nervous. I was too. And then, without warning, something slammed into the side of the car, sending us careening off the road and into the desert. The car flipped over, and everything went dark. When I came to, Jake was nowhere to be found. I stumbled out of the wreckage, calling out for him, but all I heard was the sound of my own voice echoing through the desert. I searched for hours, but there was no sign of him. That's when I saw it, the figure from before, standing on a nearby ridge, watching me with those glowing eyes. I knew then what we were dealing with: a skinwalker, a creature of Navajo legend, able to take on the form of any animal or human it chooses. I didn't waste any time. I ran as fast as I could, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, hunting me, waiting for the right moment to strike. It took me days to make it back to civilization, days filled with fear and paranoia. And when I finally reached help, I told them everything about the Skinwalker, about Jake, about the nightmare that had become my reality. But no one believed me. They said it was just a trick of the desert, a figment of my imagination. But I know the truth. I know what I saw that night, and I'll never forget it. The desert may be vast and empty, but it's also home to things that lurk in the shadows, things that are better left undisturbed. And if you ever find yourself driving through the desert at night, remember one thing: beware the Skinwalker, for it is always watching, always waiting, and it will stop at nothing to claim its prey. Seventh story. I was in prison for 15 years. There was a Skinwalker in there with us. A little background first. I was serving a 15-year sentence in a penitentiary in southern Arizona. What I was in there for isn't important. During my stay there were countless things that happened that no one could explain, and even more that no one wanted to know more about. It all started with a prison legend. Supposedly, years ago, something awful and unexplainable happened in the prison. Every morning we'd be woken up and expected to stand near the front of our cells while guards visually confirmed we were present and accounted for. Apparently, about a year before I got sent there, the most brutal and unexplainable thing happened during one of these routines. A man who had a cell to himself looked very off during this check. When a guard pulled over another guard to help him check it out, they found it wasn't actually the prisoner they were expecting at all. It was a totally different man. This man was wearing the skin of the other man over him. Loosely fitting, draped over him, apparently looked like a real monster. The scariest things was the guy wearing the skin was not an inmate. They had no idea how he even got into prison, let alone a cell. What's worse is that they couldn't even figure out who the hell he was. He wasn't documented anywhere. And what's worse than that, they never even found the body of the man of the skin he was wearing. Pretty grisly stuff, I know. And I realize that's not the goated definition of a Skinwalker, but that's what the prison called him. The Skinwalker. Didn't help that the guy never talked, apparently. Anyway, that's what started the whole Skinwalker superstition around the yard. Apparently, the guy got shipped to a different spot about a month after it happened, and just about everyone in Gym Pop felt all the better for it. I heard about the story on the second day of my stay. Hell of a story to hear, to place in your home for the foreseeable future. Now onto the real shit, though. Sure, that guy was the Skinwalker, but all he did in the long run was get an old lifer Navajo inmate to tell everyone about actual Skinwalkers. It seemed like a lot of the prison culture actually revolved around them. Now, apparently, Skinwalkers are tricky to point out on the spot, but if you manage to survive around one for more than a minute or two, almost everyone can tell the mannerisms are all off. They can mimic human speech, but not replicate it. They twitch manically. They have an unnatural gait while walking, but apparently they got better with experience. The old Navajo guy, his name was Carl, said that he was sure there was an actual one among the prisoners, slowly picking us off over the years. He called it the Grandmaster Skinwalker at one point. Apparently, he thought it had human mannerisms down so well that you might not even be able to tell if it was your cellmate for a day or two. It had to be good, he posited one night. He would expect a Skinwalker to jump at any opportunity for a kill. But this one realized it had a revolving door of people to kill coming to it, and masterfully bided its time, as Carl thought for years. A lot of guys found humor in it. A lot more were really on edge about it. Every once in a while in prison, people snap. Sometimes you'll find your cellmate swinging in front of your bunk, strung up around the neck by his pant leg. Sometimes you just can't take it anymore. But in our yard, people tended to snap in a very special way. It wouldn't be an outburst at dinner or a silent suicide in the night. Guys would just stop talking, hunch over, and shuffle around. Any friendships they had would be mostly out the window. They would turn into a loner during rec time. They would let their hair hang in front of their face. No one liked to talk about it. Like if they did, it would happen to them next. I felt the same way. I didn't know if it was a skinwalker or just people going crazy, but I didn't want to find out. It wasn't clockwork or anything, but every time someone snapped in this way, it wasn't more than a couple weeks before they were shipped off or transferred to God knows where without anyone else knowing beforehand. Then there was the nighttime occurrences. Short, loud bursts of sound echoed through my cell block during all hours of the night on a regular basis. It sounded like a mix between a pig's dying squeals and nails on a chalkboard. Just another thing no one liked to talk about. Even scarier were the shadows and footsteps. The block was dimly illuminated in the night by a few lights hanging from the ceiling outside the cells. I myself saw shadows flit across my walls on a regular occasion, when there were definitely no guards near my cell. One time near the end of my sentence, I woke up, looked at my back wall, and found a perfect silhouette of a person standing there. But when I looked, my bunkmate was asleep and no one was outside my cell. And the footsteps. Everyone hated the fucking footsteps. They were the scariest part. In the night, sometimes, more rarely than the shadows, you would hear ungodly, fast footsteps. They sounded like wet feet slapping on tile floor. Whatever caused them would fly from one end of the block to the other in a dead sprint. Whatever it was inhumanely fast. If you happened to be awake before it started, by the time you heard the footsteps on one side of your cell and whipped your head around to see the thing run by, it sounded like it was 3 cells past you. Everyone hated the footsteps. I agreed. I thought they were the worst. I was released from that place about a month ago, and I have more stories than I can count. I swear it was nearly my turn. About a week before I was discharged, my cellmate and a good friend of mine snapped. In the same kind of way. I didn't sleep for an entire week. Well, I did sleep, of course, but never for more than a few minutes at a time. Never turned my back on the guy. The scariest thing? I woke up one night to him somehow snaking his body through the bars of our cell. For reference, I couldn't get anything past my shoulder through them. The worst part, though, he was coming back into our cell. On the day of my release, I didn't say a word to him. Just left. He seemed fine with it, so was I. I had made it through 15 years of prison fights, gang disputes, and for all I know, Skinwalker abductions. I left through the front gates, a free man. As I walked along the fence for the rec yard, I spotted my cellmate standing off on his own like he had for the last week or so. I shook my head, not even really sure if it was him anymore. I took one last look over the yard, this time from the other side of the fence. I wish I hadn't. There, standing off on his own on the other side of the yard, was Carl, slouched over, eyeing the other inmates and twitching manically. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.